San Francisco, Friday night. October rain tapping against the windows of Apex Technologies' executive floor. Cole Hartley sat alone in the darkness, nothing but the glow of his laptop screen, illuminating the resignation letter he had been drafting for the past 40 minutes. 3 years, 1,095 days of loving someone he could never have. 37 carefully orchestrated rescues from blind dates arranged by a mother who wielded guilt like a scalpel. And tonight would be number 38, the final performance before he walked away from the only woman who'd ever made him want to be more than he was. His phone buzzed against the desk. The notification lit up with a single word that still had the power to stop his heart. Help. Then the rest. Alexander Winston. Harbor Restaurant. Please. Cole's finger hovered over the send button on his resignation email. One click, and he'd be free. Free from the torture of watching Sloan Mercer endure another evening with a man who saw her as a trophy acquisition. Free from pretending that each fake emergency he created didn't carve another piece out of his chest. Free from the exquisite agony of being her hero while knowing he'd never be anything more. But freedom felt hollow when measured against the thought of her sitting across from some arrogant lawyer, that practiced smile frozen on her face while something inside her slowly died. He closed the laptop without sending. What Cole didn't know, what he couldn't know as he grabbed his jacket and headed for the elevator, was that Sloan Mercer had been in love with him for 18 months. That the woman everyone called the Ice Queen of Silicon Valley kept his photo as her phone's wallpaper changed it every few weeks so she wouldn't seem obsessive even to herself. That right now, locked in the Harbor Restaurant's bathroom, she was staring at that photo and whispering to the screen, "Why couldn't you be anyone else? Why did you have to be just my assistant?" The story of how Cole Hartley fell in love with his boss began 3 years earlier, on a Tuesday morning in October, when he walked into Apex Technologies for what should have been a routine job interview. The company occupied the top 5 floors of a glass tower in the financial district, the kind of building that reflected clouds and made everyone inside look smaller than they felt. Cole had worn his only suit, charcoal gray, purchased for his sister's wedding 2 years prior, and carried a resume that he knew wouldn't impress anyone who cared about pedigree. No MBA, no Stanford degree, no previous experience at Google or Facebook or any of the other tech giants that Silicon Valley types name dropped like passwords to an exclusive club. Just 5 years as an executive assistant at a mid-sized pharmaceutical company, a bachelor's degree from San Francisco State, and a reference letter from his previous boss that used words like dependable and thorough compliments that felt like polite ways of saying unremarkable. The lobby smelled like expensive coffee and ambition. Cole checked in with reception and was directed to the executive floor, where a young woman with a headset barely looked up as she pointed him toward a glass-walled conference room. Inside, Sloan Mercer sat behind a laptop, her dark hair pulled back in a style that probably had a French name, her attention entirely focused on whatever was on her screen. She didn't look up when he entered, didn't acknowledge his presence for a full 30 seconds, while he stood there feeling increasingly like an interruption rather than an appointment. When she finally spoke, her voice had the temperature of a walk-in freezer. "Your resume isn't impressive, Mr. Hartley. No MB, no experience at a major tech company. Your last position was at a pharmaceutical firm that I've never heard of." She still hadn't looked at him. "Give me one reason why I should waste the next 20 minutes interviewing someone who's clearly unqualified for this role." Cole had prepared for skepticism about his credentials. What he hadn't prepared for was the $8,000 espresso machine sitting in the lobby with an out-of-order sign taped to its gleaming chrome surface. The machine his father would have diagnosed in under a minute, the kind of equipment that only broke because people who could afford it didn't understand how to maintain it. "Because I fixed your espresso machine while I was waiting," he heard himself say. "The one in the lobby with the sign on it. It wasn't broken, someone had adjusted the grind settings too fine, and the pressure valve got stuck. Took me about 4 minutes. You can check if you want. It should be making perfect espresso now." For the first time since he'd entered the room, Sloan Mercer looked up from her screen. Her eyes were the kind of dark brown that looked almost black in certain light, and they studied him with an intensity that made Cole feel like he was being scanned for weaknesses. "You fixed my espresso machine." It wasn't a question, but Cole nodded anyway. She stood without another word and walked out of the conference room. Cole waited, wondering if he'd just ended the interview by being presumptuous. Through the glass walls, he could see her approach the lobby espresso machine. It examined it, press a few buttons. A minute later, she returned carrying 2 small cups of espresso, one of which she placed in front of him before sitting down. The coffee was perfect, rich and smooth with a crema that would have made any barista proud. Sloan took a sip of hers, and for the first time since Cole had walked into Apex Technologies, something that might have been a smile flickered across her face. "You start Monday," she said. "8 a.m. Don't be late. And don't ever let me see that espresso machine broken again." Cole learned quickly that Sloan Mercer ran Apex Technologies the way a general might run a military campaign, with precision strategic thinking and an absolute intolerance for incompetence. She'd founded the company at 24, fresh out of Stanford, with a master's in computer science and a vision for AI-driven data analytics that had attracted $50 million in seed funding before she'd even rented office space. 10 years later, Apex was valued at $2 billion, and Sloan was regularly featured in magazines with headlines like "The Ice Queen Who's Revolutionizing Big Data" and "Silicon Valley's Most Brilliant and Intimidating CEO." The Ice Queen nickname had started as a criticism, but Sloan had embraced it, wearing it like armor. She didn't do small talk, didn't attend happy hours or company social events, arrived at the office before everyone else, and left after most had gone home. Her personal life was a mystery even to people who'd worked with her for years, and she seemed to prefer it that way. Cole's job was to make her life run smoothly, manage her calendar screen, her calls, prepare briefing documents for board meetings, ensure she had everything she needed before she realized she needed it. It was detail work that required anticipating problems before they materialized, and Cole discovered he was good at it in ways that had nothing to do with business school case studies. When the conference room projector malfunctioned 10 minutes before a crucial investor presentation, Cole was the one who opened it up and reseated a loose connection. When Sloan's laptop started overheating during a video call with Tokyo, Cole was the one who realized the cooling fan was clogged with dust and cleaned it without interrupting her meeting. When the office HVAC system failed on a 90-degree August afternoon, Cole was the one who jury-rigged a temporary fix using knowledge his father had taught him about electrical systems and airflow. These weren't the skills listed in executive assistant job descriptions. They were the skills of a man who'd grown up watching his father solve problems with his hands, who'd learned that the most valuable thing you could do was make something work when everyone else had given up. Jack Hartley had spent 40 years as an electrician in San Francisco, working on everything from Victorian houses in the Mission to high-rise construction downtown. He'd raised Cole alone after Cole's mother died when Cole was 7, teaching his son that a man's worth had nothing to do with the letters after his name and everything to do with whether he showed up when things got hard. Cole had absorbed those lessons without fully understanding them until he started working for Sloan Mercer. Then he began to see how much of the business world was built on people who knew how to talk about problems without knowing how to solve them. Sloan was different. She cared about results, not rhetoric, and she noticed when Cole delivered them. By month 2, she'd stopped calling him Mr. Hartley and started using his first name. By month 3, she was asking his opinion on decisions that technically had nothing to do with his job. By month 4, Cole realized he was looking forward to work in ways that had nothing to do with his paycheck and everything to do with the 40 seconds each morning when Sloan would actually smile at him while accepting her coffee. The first rescue happened in December, 2 months into Cole's tenure at Apex. It was a Wednesday evening and most of the office had cleared out for the day. Cole was organizing files when Sloan appeared at his desk wearing an expression he'd never seen before. Something between panic and resignation, all of it barely controlled beneath her professional mask. She needed a favor, she said, but it wasn't work-related. Cole set down the files he'd been sorting. Anything he told her and meant it. Her mother had arranged a blind date. She tried to cancel, but Catherine Mercer had already told half of San Francisco's social elite about it, and if Sloan didn't show up, her mother would make her life miserable for months. The problem was that the date started in 20 minutes, and Sloan would rather face a hostile board meeting than spend 2 hours with another man her mother had vetted for suitable breeding and bank account. "When was the last time you wanted to go on one of these dates?" Cole asked. "Never," Sloan said, and the single word carried so much exhaustion that Cole felt something shift in his chest. He told her to give him 30 minutes. Then he manufactured the first of what would become 3 years' worth of carefully crafted emergencies. A server issue that threatened to crash the entire data analytics platform. A crisis that absolutely required the CEO's immediate attention. A problem that only Sloan could solve, and solve right now, which meant she'd have to leave her date before dessert was even ordered. Sloan left for the restaurant. Cole waited exactly 28 minutes, then sent the text with the fake emergency. 15 minutes after that, his phone rang. He was talking about his car, Sloan said without preamble, for 20 straight minutes. Just describing his car, the leather interior, the engine specifications, the custom sound system. I wanted to stab myself with my salad fork. But you escaped, Cole said. Thanks to you, she replied. There was a pause and then, are you still at the office? I am. Cole confirmed, have you eaten? Cole hadn't. Sloan suggested they grab something, nothing fancy, just food because she was starving, and the restaurant had been the kind of place where they valued presentation over portion size. She knew a diner a few blocks away, if he didn't mind bad coffee and vinyl booths that had seen better decades. That was how they ended up at Sal's Diner at 9:30 on a Wednesday night, sitting across from each other in a corner booth, while a tired waitress named Dolores refilled their water glasses and called them both honey. The place smelled like grilled onions and coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long. The menu was plastic and sticky. The lighting was the kind of fluorescent that made everyone look slightly ill. Sloan visibly relaxed in a way Cole had never seen at the office. She ordered pancakes and bacon comfort food, she said, because she'd spent the last 2 hours performing being the perfect daughter for a man who'd introduced himself by mentioning his annual salary. Cole ordered the same, and they ate and talked about nothing consequential. Favorite movies, books they'd read recently. The best places to get breakfast in the city. It was the first time Cole had seen Sloan as just a person rather than a CEO, and it was the first time she'd seemed to see him as something more than the guy who fixed her espresso machine. When she asked him why he'd chosen to work at Apex despite being overqualified for an assistant position, Cole found himself telling her about his father, about growing up in a rent-controlled apartment in the Richmond district, about learning to fix everything from toasters to car engines because hiring someone was expensive, and Jack Hartley had always believed in solving your own problems. My mother died when I was 7, Cole heard himself say. Cancer. Dad raised me alone on an electrician's salary. Never once made me feel like we were missing anything, even though we were. He taught me that the value of work isn't in how much you make, but in whether you do it well, whether you show up, whether you can look at yourself in the mirror and know you earned what you have. Sloan had listened without interrupting, and when Cole finished, she was quiet for a long moment before speaking. My father died 5 years ago, she said. Heart attack at his desk. He was 59. The week before he died, we had dinner, and he told me he was proud of what I'd built with Apex. It was the last real conversation we had. She stared at her coffee cup. Sometimes I think I built this company to prove something to him. And now he's gone, and I'm still trying to prove it, except I don't know who I'm proving it to anymore. The vulnerability in her voice made Cole want to reach across the table and take her hand, but he didn't. Instead, he said, you're proving it to yourself, and that's harder than proving it to anyone else. Sloan looked up at him then, and something in her expression made Cole's heart rate kick up in a way that had nothing to do with caffeine. For just a second, the Ice Queen mask dropped completely, and he saw exhaustion and loneliness and something else he couldn't name. Then she smiled a real smile, not the professional one she used in board meetings, and said, thank you for tonight, for the rescue, and for this. You didn't have to do any of it. Cole wanted to say, I'd do anything for you. I'd manufacture 1,000 fake emergencies if it meant you never had to pretend to be someone you're not. Instead, he said, anytime, Ms. Mercer. She told him to call her Sloan, at least when they weren't in the office. And Cole realized driving home that night that he was in serious trouble. The rescues became a pattern. Every few weeks, Catherine Mercer would arrange another suitable match for her daughter men with the right connections, the right schools, the right family backgrounds. Sloan would agree to go trapped by guilt over a debt she'd never fully explained to Cole. And Cole would create another crisis that required Sloan's immediate attention, each one different enough that nobody started asking questions. A major client threatening to pull their contract, a potential data breach, a board member demanding an emergency meeting, legal issues that needed immediate CEO review. Cole became fluent in the language of corporate crisis learning, exactly what would be believable enough to justify Sloan abandoning a date, but vague enough that it could resolve itself by morning. And after each rescue, they'd end up at Sal's Diner. The pattern became sacred in its own way, rescue followed by terrible coffee and honest conversation, the only time in Sloane's carefully controlled life when she could stop performing. Cole cataloged everything he learned about her in those late-night sessions. That she loved old noir films despite claiming not to have time for movies. That she'd wanted to be a pianist before she fell in love with computer science. That she sometimes drove out to Ocean Beach at dawn just to watch the waves. That her favorite food was actually the $5 burgers from a food truck near the office, not the $100 tasting menus her social circle preferred. He learned that she carried the weight of apex technologies like Atlas, carried the world feeling personally responsible for every employee's livelihood and every client's success. That she hadn't dated seriously in 6 years because anyone who approached her either wanted access to her network or felt threatened by her success. That the Ice Queen persona was armor she'd built to survive in a world that punished women for being ambitious and successful in ways it never punished men. And slowly, inexorably, Cole fell in love. It wasn't a single moment, but an accumulation of hundreds of tiny ones. The way she'd absently say thank you when he set her coffee down each morning, the muscle memory so ingrained she didn't even look up. The way she'd trusted him enough to show vulnerability. The way she remembered that he took his coffee black and that he hated jazz and that his father's birthday was in March. By the end of the first year, Cole was hopelessly, completely in love with Sloane Mercer. And he knew with absolute certainty that he could never tell her. The power dynamic alone made it impossible. He was her employee. She was his boss. Any confession would put her in an impossible position, either reciprocate and face accusations of inappropriate conduct or reject him and make their working relationship unbearably awkward. Beyond that, there was the gulf of their different worlds. She was a billionaire CEO who'd built an empire before 30. He was the son of an electrician, someone who'd fixed her espresso machine to get a job. So Cole kept quiet and told himself it was enough just to be near her. Told himself that the late nights at Sal's diner were a gift he didn't deserve. Told himself that manufacturing fake emergencies to save her from terrible dates was just being a good assistant, nothing more. He almost believed it until the night 18 months ago, when everything changed, though he wouldn't know it had changed until much later. It was April of the second year. Cole had rescued Sloane from a date with a Harvard professor who'd spent 40 minutes explaining why women's brains were evolutionarily less suited for strategic thinking. They'd ended up at Sal's as usual, and Sloane had been more exhausted than Cole had ever seen her. She'd ordered coffee and barely touched it, just sat staring out the window at the empty street. "I'm so tired, Cole," she'd said finally. Not physically, just tired of all of it. Tired of performing, tired of being the Ice Queen, tired of going home to an empty apartment and wondering if this is just what my life is now. Success and loneliness in equal measure forever. Cole had started to respond, but she'd kept talking, the words spilling out like she'd been holding them back for years. "Do you know what the worst part is? Every single one of these men my mother sets me up with, they all say the same things. They talk about wanting a partner, but what they mean is they want a trophy. Someone successful enough to be impressive at dinner parties, but not so successful that they feel threatened. Someone who will let them be the important one in the relationship. And I sit there and smile and pretend I don't notice that they're already planning how to manage me." She'd looked at Cole, then really looked at him in a way that made him forget how to breathe. "You're the only person who doesn't do that. You don't try to manage me or fix me or make me smaller so you can feel bigger. You just see me, the actual me, and I don't know whether to thank you for that or apologize because it probably makes your job harder when your boss is falling apart in a diner at midnight." "You're not falling apart," Cole had said. "You're being human. There's a difference." Sloane had smiled at that, sad and small. Then she'd reached across the table and squeezed his hand just once, barely 3 seconds before pulling back and suggesting they should probably call it a night. Cole had driven home and lain awake until dawn, the feeling of her hand on his replaying in an endless loop. He didn't know that Sloane had driven home and done the same thing. Didn't know that the brief touch had been the moment she'd realized she was in love with her assistant and had absolutely no idea what to do about it. 18 months of knowing and not telling. 18 months of continuing the rescue pattern, continuing the late nights at Sal's, continuing to exist in this strange limbo where they were more than boss and employee but less than what they both wanted. Sloane kept waiting for the feeling to fade. Cole kept waiting for the courage to quit so the wanting would stop hurting. Neither thing happened. Instead, they developed new patterns. Sloan started asking Cole's opinion on decisions that had nothing to do with his job description. Cole started anticipating what she'd need before she needed it, not just coffee and calendar management, but the right data for a pitch meeting or a reminder to eat when she'd been in back-to-back calls for 6 hours. They developed a shorthand that made other executives jealous, a way of communicating with a look or a gesture that bypassed words entirely. People at Apex noticed. Sarah from finance made a knowing comment about how Sloan seemed to really rely on Cole. Tom from engineering asked if Cole had some kind of magic charm that made the notoriously demanding CEO actually smile occasionally. Garrett Sullivan, the CFO, who'd been with Apex since its early days, pulled Cole aside one afternoon with a warning disguised as friendly advice. "She trusts you," Garrett said. "That's rare. Sloan doesn't trust easily. Just remember that some lines exist for a reason. I've seen talented people lose good positions because they forgot where those lines were." Cole knew exactly which line Garrett meant. The one between professional and personal, between appropriate and catastrophic, between wanting and having. He'd been so careful about that line, never staying late when other employees had left, never suggesting plans outside their post-rescue ritual, never letting his feelings show in his work. But the line was getting harder to see as the months accumulated. Harder to remember why it mattered when Sloan would look at him, sometimes with an expression that made him wonder if maybe possibly she felt something too. He tried to test the theory indirectly. Started mentioning Dutch Brennan, his best friend, who owned a auto repair shop in the Mission. Dutch had known Cole since they were kids growing up in the same neighborhood, and he'd been the one Cole confessed to when the feelings for Sloan became impossible to ignore. "You're in love with your boss," Dutch had said, not a question, but a statement of fact. "And you're going to what? Just keep pretending you're not." "What else can I do?" Cole had asked. "She's a CEO. I'm an assistant. Even if she felt the same way, which she doesn't, we work together. It's impossible." Dutch had looked at him with the particular kind of exasperation reserved for old friends watching you sabotage yourself. "Nothing's impossible, man. Just scary. There's a difference." But the fear was real and Cole couldn't shake it. Fear of rejection, yes, but more than that, fear of losing what they already had. The late nights at Sal's where Sloan could be herself. The easy partnership they'd developed. The way she'd started calling him when she needed to vent about a board meeting or celebrate a successful product launch, not because he was her assistant, but because he was the person who understood. If he told her how he felt and she didn't reciprocate, all of that would disappear. And if she did reciprocate, the consequences could destroy her career and his. Workplace relationships between supervisors and employees were against company policy. The board would have questions. The tech press would have a field day with headlines about the Ice Queen's inappropriate office romance. Sloan had worked too hard to risk it all for something that probably wouldn't work anyway. So Cole stayed quiet through year 2 and into year 3. Stayed quiet through rescue number 35, 36, 37. Stayed quiet until that Friday night in October when he finally decided he couldn't do it anymore. The decision to resign had been building for months. Each rescue hurt a little more. Each late-night conversation at Sal's made him want things he couldn't have. He'd started losing sleep, started making mistakes at work, started snapping at Dutch, when his friends suggested maybe Cole should just tell Sloan the truth. The final straw came in September, rescue number 37. Sloan had been set up with a tech CEO who'd spent the entire dinner explaining why AI companies needed male leadership because women were too risk-averse. She'd escaped to Sal's and spent 2 hours alternating between fury and despair, and somewhere around 1 in the morning, she'd looked at Cole and asked, "Why don't you date anyone?" The question had caught Cole completely off guard. He'd fumbled for an answer. "I date. Just nothing serious." "But why not?" Sloan had pressed. "You're smart kind, actually capable of having a conversation that isn't just you monologuing. Why are you still single? Because I'm in love with you," had been right there on Cole's tongue, desperate to escape. Instead, he'd said, "Haven't found the right person, I guess." Sloan had studied him for a long moment, and Cole had been terrified she could read the truth written across his face. Then she'd said very quietly, "The right person is very lucky. I hope they know that." Cole had driven home that night and started drafting his resignation letter. Told himself it was the only way. If he stayed at Apex, the wanting would eventually destroy him. Better to leave now while he could still pretend it was just about career growth, finding a new challenge, time for a change. He'd been working on that letter for 3 weeks, revising it every few nights, trying to find words that wouldn't reveal too much while explaining enough. And he'd been planning to send it tonight, Friday, October something, end of the fiscal quarter. Good timing for a transition. He'd rehearsed what he'd say to Sloan when she asked why. Had a whole speech prepared about new opportunities and professional development and all the corporate buzzwords that masked the truth. Then her text had arrived. Help, Alexander Winston. Harbor Restaurant. Please. And Cole had realized he wasn't ready to stop being her hero. Not yet. One more time. One last rescue. Then he'd quit, and maybe eventually the wanting would fade to something bearable. Harbor Restaurant occupied prime real estate on the Embarcadero, the kind of place where appetizers cost $30 and the waitstaff used words like amuse-bouche without irony. Cole arrived in the rideshare he'd called after his car had refused to start, walked the last 4 blocks through October rain, and stood outside the restaurant trying to decide how to play this final rescue. Inside, through the windows, he could see Sloan sitting across from a man in his late 40s who had the particular confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Alexander Winston, senior partner at one of the city's most prestigious law firms, the kind of man Catherine Mercer would consider eminently suitable. Cole watched Sloan's face, her professional mask perfectly in place, not a flicker of emotion showing, and felt his carefully maintained restraint crack. 37 times he'd done this. 37 manufactured emergencies to save her from men who didn't deserve her attention. But this time something felt different. This time Cole realized he wasn't just rescuing her from a bad date. He was rescuing her from a life built on other people's expectations, a future constructed by her mother's fear and social conditioning, and the cruel math that said successful women had to choose between ambition and happiness. And he was done watching her suffer that choice. Cole walked into Harbor Restaurant like a man who had finally stopped pretending, approached the hostess stand with enough confidence that the young woman didn't question him when he said he needed to speak with Miss Mercer, immediately, urgent business matter. She led him through the dining room to a corner table where Sloan and Alexander Winston sat in obvious conversational discomfort. Sloan saw him first, her eyes wide in fractionally surprise and relief, and something else Cole couldn't quite name. Alexander followed her gaze and his expression shifted to annoyance. "Can I help you?" Alexander asked the kind of question that really meant, "How dare you interrupt?" Cole looked at Sloan, only at Sloan. "Ms. Mercer, I apologize for the interruption, but we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. It's urgent." What kind of situation? Alexander demanded before Sloan could respond. "If your company has such poor boundaries that employees feel entitled to interrupt the CEO during her personal time, perhaps you need to establish better management structures." The condescension in his voice made Cole's jaw tighten, but Sloan stood before he could respond. Her movements were controlled, deliberate. "Excuse me, Alexander, I'll be just a moment." She walked past Cole toward the restaurant's entrance, and he followed, acutely aware of Alexander's glare burning into his back. Outside, the rain had picked up. Sloan stood under the awning, arms crossed, and turned to face him. "What's the emergency?" she asked, but her voice lacked the edge it should have had. Instead, she sounded tired, resigned, like she'd been expecting this and dreading it in equal measure. Cole had prepared a lie. Server failure, data breach, client crisis, all the usual fictional disasters that would justify pulling her away. But standing there in the rain, looking at Sloan's carefully maintained composure, he found he couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't manufacture one more fake emergency, couldn't pretend this was about business. "There isn't one," he said. "No emergency, no crisis, just me not being able to watch you sit in there with another man who doesn't see you." Sloan's breath caught. What? Cole stepping closer, rain soaking through his jacket. "I lied. My car isn't broken down. I took a rideshare here. Walked the last 4 blocks, and I lied because I couldn't stay in that office knowing you were here with Alexander Winston talking about whatever the hell he's been talking about for the past hour. I couldn't do it. Not one more time." "Cole, you didn't need to," Sloan started, but he cut her off. 3 years, Sloan. 3 years I've watched you go on these dates with men who don't deserve you. Men who see you as a status symbol or a conquest or a problem to be managed. 3 years of manufacturing, fake emergencies, so you could escape from situations you should never have been in to begin with. And I can't do it anymore because every single time it kills me a little more. The professional mask Sloan had worn all evening was cracking. Now her carefully maintained composure fracturing into something raw. You're not making sense. I'm making perfect sense, Cole said, his voice rougher than he intended. I'm saying I'm in love with you. That I've been in love with you since you smiled at me over that first cup of espresso. That I love how you work until 2 in the morning because you actually care about your employees, not just your profit margins. That I love how you remember everyone's names, the janitor, the interns, the security guard who works nights. That I love how you pretend to like $12 artisanal coffee, but you actually prefer the $2 stuff from Sal's Diner. The words were spilling out now, 3 years of restraint crumbling all at once. I love you. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, not the ice queen that everyone writes articles about. I love Sloan, the woman who's scared to be happy, the woman who laughs at terrible jokes, the woman who deserves to be loved exactly as she is, not as some acceptable version her mother approves of. Sloane's eyes were bright rain or tears or both. Cole, I can't. You're my employee. The board would, I'll resign. Cole interrupted. I've already written the letter. Just say the word and I'll send it right now, because I can't keep working for you while feeling this way. I can't keep pretending that those nights at Sal's are just friendly conversations. I can't keep lying to myself that maybe someday I'll stop wanting you. The silence stretched between them, broken only by rain and the distant sound of traffic on the Embarcadero. Sloan was staring at him like he'd just spoken a language she'd forgotten she knew. So tell me, Cole said quietly, is it just me? Or have you felt this too? Sloane's response came out as barely more than a whisper. I've felt everything, Cole. Every single thing you just said. For 18 months I've felt it, and every day I've told myself it was impossible. That you couldn't possibly feel the same way. That I was the ice queen, and you were too good, too genuine, too real for someone like me. The confession hit Cole like electricity. Wait, 18 months. I've been in love with you since the night you stayed with me until 4 in the morning, helping me prepare that presentation, she said, words tumbling out faster now. Since you covered me with your jacket when I fell asleep at my desk and you didn't wake me up or take advantage or make it weird. Since I realized that you were the only person in my entire life who wanted nothing from me except for me to be happy. But you're my boss, Cole managed. The power dynamic makes it impossible. Sloan finished. I know. That's why I never said anything. Because even if you felt the same way, which I never thought you did acting on, it would put you in a terrible position. Either reciprocate and risk your career or reject me and make work unbearable. So we've both been in love and both been too scared to admit it, Cole said, and despite everything, he almost laughed. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. It's not ridiculous, Sloan said. It's realistic. Cole, if we do this, everything changes. My mother will disown me. The board will have questions. The tech press will write think pieces about whether female CEOs can maintain professional boundaries. Your career will be defined by being the guy who dated his boss. Are you ready for that? Cole stepped closer, close enough now that he could see the rain droplets caught in her hair. I've spent 3 years hiding how I feel because I was afraid of consequences. I'm done being afraid. So yes, I'm ready. The question is, are you? Sloan looked up at him, and for the first time since Cole had known her, the Ice Queen mask disappeared completely. In its place was just Sloan, vulnerable and exhausted and desperately, achingly hopeful. If we do this, if we really do this, we go all in. We tell HR. We handle it properly. We face whatever comes together, not as boss and employee, but as equals. Can you handle that? I've been handling crises for you for 3 years, Cole said. I think I can handle one more. Then kiss me, Sloan whispered. Before I remember all the reasons, this is a terrible idea. Cole closed the remaining distance and kissed her. The first kiss after 3 years of wanting, after 37 rescues and countless late nights and 1,000 moments of almost. Her hands came up to his jacket, pulling him closer, and Cole thought dimly that this was worth it. Worth the risk, worth the consequences, worth everything that would come after. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Sloan was smiling, really smiling, Not the professional version, but something genuine and unguarded. Your car really isn't broken, she asked. Dutch lent me his truck, Cole admitted. I lied about the emergency too. There's no crisis at Apex. You walked 4 blocks in the rain to lie to me about a fake emergency so you could tell me you're in love with me, Sloan said, and she started laughing. That's the most romantic and ridiculous thing anyone's ever done. I prefer to think of it as committed, Cole said, but he was grinning too. They ended up in the truck. Dutch had lent him a beat-up Ford that smelled like motor oil and had a crack in the windshield. Sloan sat in the passenger seat and looked around with an expression that suggested she'd never been in a vehicle this old before, but she was still smiling. We should probably talk about what happens Monday, she said. Cole started the engine. Monday, we go to HR. I transfer to a different department. We do everything by the book, so nobody can say we handled this inappropriately. You'll have to report to someone else, Sloan said. No more being my assistant, Good Cole said, because I don't want to be your assistant anymore. I want to be your partner, in every sense of the word. Sloan reached across the console and took his hand. We're really doing this. After 3 years of pretending we're actually doing this, we are Cole confirmed. And your mother is going to lose her mind. Sloan's expression shifted, the smile fading into something more complicated. My mother, she said slowly, is going to do everything in her power to destroy this. You need to understand that, Cole. Catherine Mercer doesn't accept defiance, especially not from me. She'll use her connections. She'll threaten my position on the board. She might even try to have you fired. Then we'll deal with it, Cole said firmly. Together, that's what partners do. Sloan studied him for a long moment. You mean that? You're actually ready to fight my mother, the board, whoever we need to fight. I fought for you for 3 years without you even knowing it, Cole said. You think I'm going to stop now when I finally have you? Something in Sloan's expression shifted, then walls coming down that Cole hadn't even known existed. You have no idea what you're getting into. Probably not. Not, Cole agreed. But I know what I'm getting you, and that's worth whatever comes next. They drove through San Francisco in comfortable silence, rain drumming on the roof of Dutch's truck. Sloan kept hold of his hand, her thumb tracing absent patterns against his palm. When they stopped at a red light near Union Square, Cole glanced over and found her watching him with an intensity that made his heart rate kick up. What he asked? I'm just trying to figure out if you're real, she said quietly. If any of this is real, because I've imagined it so many times what it would be like if you felt the same way. And now that it's happening, I'm terrified I'm going to wake up and it will have been a dream. It's real, Cole promised. I'm real. This is real. And Monday morning, we were going to walk into Maggie Reed's office and make it official. The light changed. Cole drove. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know as they drove through the rain-slicked streets, was that Catherine Mercer had hired a private investigator 3 weeks earlier. That the investigator had photographed their kiss outside Harbor Restaurant. That even now, Catherine was looking at those photos on her phone and making phone calls to board members, her voice tight with fury as she explained that her daughter was involved with an employee and something needed to be done. The war they thought they were preparing for had already begun. But for now, in the cab of Dutch's borrowed truck with rain falling and the city lights blurring past Cole and Sloan, allowed themselves to believe that love might actually be enough. Sunday morning arrived cold and bright, the kind of October day when San Francisco pretended it understood the concept of autumn. Cole drove to his father's house in the Richmond district, the same modest Victorian where he'd grown up, where Jack Hartley had raised him alone, on an electrician's wages, and taught him that a man's character mattered more than his bank account. The smell of coffee and bacon greeted him at the door. Jack was already at the kitchen table, newspaper spread out, reading glasses perched on his nose. At 65, he moved a little slower than he used to, his hands bearing the scars of 4 decades working with electrical systems and stubborn machinery. But his eyes were sharp when he looked up at Cole, taking in his son's expression with the kind of perception that came from years of reading people. You look like someone who either won the lottery or committed a felony. Jack folded the newspaper. Since you're not in handcuffs, I'm guessing it's the former. Cole sat down, accepted the coffee his father poured. I told her. Last night, told Sloan how I feel. Jack's eyebrows rose fractionally. And she feels the same way. Has for 18 months, apparently. We've both been in love and both too scared to admit it. Jack leaned back in his chair, studying his son. Well, that's either the best news I've heard all year or the beginning of a spectacular disaster. Which one depends entirely on what happens next. Monday, we go to HR, Cole explained. I transfer departments. We do everything properly so there's no question about ethics or favoritism. But Dad, there's a complication. Her mother, the one who sets up those blind dates you've been rescuing her from Catherine Mercer. Old San Francisco Money owns 15% of Apex, has enough social connections to make things very difficult if she wants to. And she's going to want to because I'm not exactly the son-in-law she's been planning for. Jack was quiet for a moment, then stood and moved to the stove where bacon was sizzling. You remember what I told you when you graduated college, when you were deciding between that corporate job in New York and staying here, you said home matters more than money. I said that the value of a man's life isn't measured by what he accumulates, but by who he becomes. Jack flipped the bacon with practiced efficiency. Your mother, God rest her, she came from money. Not as much as this Mercer woman probably, but enough that her family thought I was unsuitable. Electrician from the Sunset District, Irish Catholic, no prospects beyond a union job. Cole had heard fragments of this story before, but never the details. What happened? Your mother told them she'd rather be happy with me than miserable with someone they approved of. It cost her the inheritance, cost her the relationship with her parents for a while. But she never regretted it. Not once, even when things were tight financially. You know why, Waya? Because she understood something that took me years to learn. Jack turned to face his son. Real wealth isn't money in a bank account. It's waking up next to someone you actually love. It's building a life with a partner who sees you not what you can provide. Your mother had that with me, and I had it with her. 7 years wasn't enough time, but it was real. The grief was old now, worn smooth by decades, but Cole could still hear it in his father's voice. I'm scared, he admitted. Scared that Sloane's going to lose everything because of me. Her company, her relationship with her mother, her reputation. Jack plated the bacon, set it on the table between them. Son, listen to me carefully. I worked 40 years as an electrician. People looked at me like I was just the guy who fixed their lights. But every time some doctor or lawyer or CEO called me because their house had no power, they learned real quick that they needed me. Without me, they sat in the dark. You understand what I'm saying? Not exactly. Your value doesn't get defined by other people. It gets defined by you, by what you contribute, by how you show up when things get hard. You love this woman more than anything, and she loves you. She does. Then you fight, Jack said simply. But you don't fight by apologizing for who you are. You fight by being the best man you can be. You work harder than everyone else. You prove your worth through actions, not words. And you stand beside her, not behind her, not in front of her, but beside her as an equal partner. That's what a real man does. The words settled into Cole like something he'd known, but needed to hear aloud. His father poured more coffee, and they ate breakfast, while Jack told stories about the early days with Cole's mother, about the battles they'd fought against families and expectations, and people who couldn't understand why love should matter more than social convention. One more thing, Jack added as Cole was leaving. This Catherine Mercer, she's going to come at you hard. She'll use every weapon she has, money, connections, influence. Don't let her make you feel small. You're not small. You're just different from what she expected, and that terrifies her. Why would it terrify her? Because people who measure worth in dollars don't know what to do with people who measure it in character. You threaten her entire worldview just by existing. Cole drove back to his apartment, thinking about his father's words, about his mother's choice, about the cost of building something real. His phone buzzed with a text from Sloane. We still doing this? He typed back immediately. Absolutely. Meet at HR at 8, I'll be there. Her response came through, then another message. Cole, thank you for last night, for all of it. Monday morning, Maggie Reed's office felt smaller than it should have, with 3 people crowded inside. The HR director was a woman in her late 40s who'd worked at Apex since its early days, and she listened to their disclosure with the kind of practiced neutrality that came from years of handling sensitive situations. I appreciate you coming forward immediately, Maggie said after they'd explained the situation. That shows good judgment. However, we need to address the power dynamic concern. Cole, you currently report directly to Sloane. That's not tenable if you're in a romantic relationship. I've prepared a proposal, Cole said, sliding a folder across her desk. Transfer to strategic operations, reporting to Garrett Sullivan. It's a lateral move to a role I'm qualified for. I've outlined my relevant experience and why I think I'd be a good fit for the department. Maggie reviewed the documents, her expression giving nothing away. This is thorough. You've clearly thought this through. We want to do this right, Sloan added. No preferential treatment, no appearance of impropriety. I'll recuse myself from any decisions involving Cole's compensation or advancement. We'll maintain professional boundaries during work hours. I'll need to conduct an investigation, Maggie said. Interview colleagues about your working relationship review. Cole's performance history, make sure there's no pattern of favoritism that would suggest the relationship influenced business decisions. My performance reviews are documented, Cole offered. Every raise and bonus I've received has been justified by specific achievements. You're welcome to audit all of it. Maggie made notes on her tablet. I'll also need to implement a 30-day cooling off period. During that time, Cole will transfer to strategic operations, but your relationship cannot be public knowledge within the company. If everything checks out after the investigation, you'll be free to be open about your relationship. But for the next month, you need to maintain complete discretion. Sloane's jaw tightened fractionally, but she nodded. We understand. One more thing, Maggie added, her tone shifting slightly. I received a call this morning from Catherine Mercer. She's aware of your relationship, and she's not pleased. She mentioned having concerns about corporate governance and suggested the board should be informed immediately. Let me guess, Sloane's voice had gone cold. She wants an emergency board meeting. She's already contacted Bradford Langley about it. Maggie's expression was sympathetic. I can't speak to what happens at the board level, but you should be prepared for questions and for scrutiny. After they left Maggie's office, Cole and Sloane stood in the hallway outside the early morning sun, slanting through the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the financial district. Around them, Apex was coming to life, employees arriving, coffee brewing, the normal rhythm of a Monday beginning. She's moving fast, Sloane said quietly. Faster than I expected. Your mother? She knows that if she gives us time to establish the relationship as legitimate, it's harder for her to argue against it. So she's attacking now while it's still new, still vulnerable. It's actually smart strategy. What do? We do exactly what we told Maggie we'd do. You transfer to strategic operations. I recuse myself from decisions about you. We prove that this relationship doesn't compromise our professional judgment, and we prepare for whatever my mother throws at us. Cole wanted to pull her into his arms, wanted to kiss away the worry lines forming between her eyebrows. But they were at work now, in full view of anyone walking past, and the 30-day discretion period had just started. So instead, he just said, we'll handle it. Together. Sloane managed a small smile. I'm going to hold you to that. The investigation Maggie conducted was thorough and professional. She interviewed a dozen of Cole's colleagues, reviewed 3 years of performance evaluations, examined every bonus and raise he'd received. By Wednesday afternoon, she'd confirmed what Cole already knew: there was no evidence of preferential treatment. His promotions had been earned through documented achievements. His raises had been justified by his performance metrics. Whatever was between him and Sloane, it hadn't influenced her professional decisions about his career. But on Thursday morning, the first anonymous complaint arrived. Maggie called Cole into her office to inform him. Someone submitted a report through our confidential ethics hotline, claiming they witnessed inappropriate conduct between you and Sloane. Physical intimacy in the office after hours. Cole's stomach dropped. That's not true. I know, Maggie interrupted. I've been reviewing security footage and access logs. The complaint specified last Tuesday at 11 p.m. in Sloane's office. Security footage shows you left the building at 7:15 that evening. Sloane left at 9:30. You were never in the office together that late, so someone made it up, or someone is trying to manufacture evidence against you. Maggie pulled up something on her computer. The complaint came through our ethics portal, which allows anonymous submissions. But I requested the IT logs. The submission originated from an IP address registered to Hartwell & Associates, a law firm that Catherine Mercer has used for years. Catherine filed a false complaint. More likely her attorneys did at her request. Maggie's expression was grim. An hour later, a second complaint came through from a different anonymous source, also from the same IP address. Both complaints are unsubstantiated and contradicted by security evidence, but they're now part of your file. Can we remove them? I can note them as unsubstantiated, but I can't delete them entirely. That would violate our record-keeping protocols. Maggie leaned back in her chair. Cole, I'm going to be blunt. Someone is building a case against you and Sloan. They're creating a paper trail of complaints that will be used to argue your relationship is inappropriate and damaging to company culture. You need to be prepared for this to get worse before it gets better. That afternoon, Cole transferred officially to strategic operations. Garrett Sullivan met him in his new workspace, a cubicle on the 20th floor, nowhere near the executive suite where Sloan's office occupied prime real estate. Garrett was a numbers person, precise and analytical, someone who'd helped Sloan navigate Apex's financial growth from startup to billion-dollar company. Welcome to the team, Garrett said, shaking Cole's hand. I've heard good things about your work. Also heard you're dating the CEO, which takes balls I'm not sure I'd have. I prefer to think of it as commitment rather than stupidity. Time will tell which one it is. Garrett gestured to a stack of folders on the desk. Your first assignment, the Patterson account. Major client $15 million annual contract, and they're threatening to walk. Senior team has been trying to salvage it for 2 months without success. You've got 72 hours to figure out what they want, or we lose them. Cole opened the top folder and started reading. By page 3, he'd identified the problem. Patterson wasn't unhappy with Apex's analytics platform. They were unhappy with the implementation support. The senior team had been treating this as a technology issue when it was actually a customer service issue. He spent the next 3 days essentially living at the office, but not on the executive floor, where he might run into Sloan and trigger gossip. Instead, he camped out in conference rooms and worked through nights reaching out directly to Patterson's IT director, scheduling video calls, listening to their actual concerns, rather than assuming he knew what they needed. By Thursday afternoon, he'd restructured the support agreement, brought in additional training resources, and convinced Patterson to not just stay, but expand their contract. Garrett reviewed the new terms and let out a low whistle. You just turned a potential $15 million loss into a $22 million win in 3 days, with no sleep and probably too much coffee. The coffee part is accurate. The senior team spent 2 months trying to solve this and couldn't crack it. How did you do it differently? I listened, Cole said simply. They were telling us what they needed. We just weren't hearing it because we were too busy trying to sell them what we wanted to sell. Garrett studied him for a long moment. You know the rumors are already starting, right? That you got this position because of your relationship with Sloan. That you're using her to advance your career. I know. And it pisses you off. It does. But arguing about it won't change anyone's mind. Delivering results will. Smart Garrett acknowledged. Keep that attitude, and you might actually survive this. On Friday morning, exactly 1 week after Cole had kissed Sloan in the rain, outside Harbor Restaurant, the Tech Business Weekly article dropped. The headline read, Ice Queen melts questions arise over Victoria Sloan Mercer's office romance. Someone had leaked the story to the press, and they'd run with it. The article cited anonymous Apex employees claiming Cole had received preferential treatment, questioned whether Sloan's judgment had been compromised, included a quote from an industry analyst suggesting this raised concerns about corporate governance at a company valued in the billions. And there prominently featured was a statement from Catherine Mercer. I'm deeply concerned about my daughter's recent behavior. This isn't like Sloan. She's always been intensely professional and private. I worry that stress or outside influences may be affecting her judgment. As a significant shareholder, I have a responsibility to ensure Apex maintains the highest ethical standards. The article spread through the office like wildfire. Cole could feel the stares as he walked to his desk, hear the whispers that cut off when he got too close. Sarah from finance actually stopped him in the hallway, her expression sympathetic. For what it's worth, I think you two are good together. I've seen how Sloan lights up when you're around. But plenty of others weren't as generous. An overheard conversation near the coffee station suggested Cole was a gold digger, someone who deliberately seduced the CEO for career advancement. Another whispered exchange speculated about whether Sloan was having some kind of breakdown, whether her judgment could be trusted. Cole kept his head down and focused on work. Proved that the Patterson win wasn't a fluke by identifying issues in 2 other client accounts and proposing solutions that Garrett immediately implemented. Showed up early and stayed late and gave no one any ammunition to suggest he was coasting on his relationship. But it grounded him the whispers and speculation. Speculation, the way people assume they knew his motivations without knowing anything about him. Dutch showed up at the office unannounced on Friday afternoon, timing his visit for Cole's lunch break. They grabbed sandwiches from a food truck and found a bench in a small plaza a few blocks from Apex's building. You look like hell, Dutch observed, unwrapping his sandwich. I feel like hell. The article's bullshit, you know. Anyone who knows you knows you're not in this for money or status or whatever they're suggesting. Not everyone knows me. Then show them who you are. Dutch took a bite, chewed thoughtfully. You remember when we were kids and those assholes from Pacific Heights used to come to our neighborhood and give a shit about being poor? Cole remembered. The fights, the insults, the constant reminder that they lived in the wrong part of the city. You never backed down. Dutch continued, even when they outnumbered us. Even when it would have been easier to just take the insult and walk away. You stood your ground because you knew who you were and you weren't going to let anyone make you feel less than. This is different. Is it, or is it just the same fight in a nicer building? Dutch met his eyes. People are always going to question you when you don't fit their narrative. The poor kid who became an executive assistant. The working class guy who won the heart of a billionaire CEO. They need you to be a gold digger because otherwise they have to question their own assumptions about how the world works. So what do? You do what you've always done. You show up, you work, you prove them wrong through actions, not arguments. And you don't let them make you small. Monday brought a new challenge. Cole was in the cafeteria grabbing lunch when he overheard a conversation from the next table over. Two guys from the engineering department, voices low but not quite low enough. I'm just saying it's convenient. 3 years as an assistant, going nowhere, then suddenly he's dating the CEO and getting promoted to strategic operations. You don't think there's a connection? Of course there's a connection. The question is whether he's actually qualified or just riding her coattails. My money's on gold digger. I mean, look at where he comes from. Father was a tradesman or something, no elite education. He saw an opportunity and he took it. Cole's hands tightened on his lunch tray. He was about to walk away, preserve what remained of his dignity, when a familiar voice cut through the cafeteria noise. Excuse me. Dutch Brennan, wearing grease-stained work clothes and an expression that suggested he'd be happy to demonstrate what real manual labor looked like, stood beside the engineer's table. I couldn't help overhearing your conversation. You were discussing my friend Cole Hartley. The two engineers exchanged uncertain glances. We didn't mean... No, please continue. Dutch pulled out a chair and sat down uninvited. You were saying something about him being a gold digger. About riding coattails. Look, we don't know you. I'm Dutch. I've known Cole since we were 8 years old growing up in the same neighborhood. So let me tell you about the guy you're gossiping about over your $15 salads. Dutch's voice carried now loud enough that nearby tables were paying attention. When my father died, I was 16, didn't know how I was going to support my mom and little sister. Cole and his dad spent 6 months teaching me auto mechanics so I could get a job. Spent their evenings and weekends, wouldn't accept a penny for it. You know why? Because that's who Cole Hartley is. He's the guy who sees someone struggling and helps not because there's something in it for him, but because it's the right thing to do. One of the engineers started to speak, but Dutch kept going. You want to know about his qualifications? Cole has skills you can't learn in any MBA program. He can fix anything: electronics, machinery, software systems. While you were memorizing algorithms, he was learning how to actually solve problems. And yeah, his father was a tradesman, 40 years as an electrician, one of the best in the city. You ever had an electrical emergency at your house? Ever been sitting in the dark because your fancy smart home system crashed? That's when you'd have called Jack Hartley and paid him whatever he asked to fix it. The cafeteria had gone quieter now. More people listening. Cole stood frozen by the serving line, torn between gratitude and embarrassment. Cole Hartley doesn't need anyone's money. Dutch stood up, his voice hard. What he has is integrity, skill, and loyalty. He has a heart bigger than both of you combined. So before you sit here speculating about his motivations, maybe consider that some people actually fall in love because they found someone who sees them as a human being rather than a status symbol. Maybe that's a foreign concept in your world, but it's real in ours. Dutch walked over to where Cole stood and clapped him on the shoulder. Come on, let's eat somewhere these people won't poison your appetite with their bullshit assumptions. They left the cafeteria in silence, but Cole could feel dozens of eyes following them. Outside in the small plaza where they had eaten sandwiches days earlier, Dutch exhaled heavily. Sorry if I made that worse. You didn't. Cole managed. Thank you for that, for defending me. That's what brothers do. Not the biological kind, but the kind that matter. You'd do the same for me. I would. Then we're even. Dutch studied him. How's Sloane handling all this? She's fighting battles on multiple fronts, Cole said. Her mother, the board public perception. I wish I could do more to help her, but the 30-day discretion period means we can barely even talk at work. You're helping by being exactly who you are, by not giving them any real ammunition. Keep doing that. That evening, Cole got a text from Sloane asking if he could meet her. Not at Sal's Diner, their usual refuge, too public now with the press attention. Instead, she suggested her apartment, the penthouse in Pacific Heights, that Cole had never visited during their 3 years of professional relationship. The building had a doorman who checked Cole's ID and called up for verification before allowing him to the elevator. The apartment itself occupied the entire top floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, offering views of the bay that probably cost more per month than Cole's entire year's rent. Sloane answered the door wearing jeans and an old Stanford sweatshirt. No makeup, hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked exhausted and beautiful and barely holding it together. Come in, she said. Please, I needed to see you, needed to remember why we're doing this. Cole stepped inside and she immediately wrapped her arms around him, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a shifting world. They stood like that for a long moment, neither speaking, just existing together in the quiet of her apartment. Finally, Sloane pulled back, led him to the kitchen where she had wine already poured. They sat at the counter and she showed him her phone, pulled up article after article that had run in the past week. Analysis pieces questioning her judgment. Opinion columns about whether female CEOs could maintain professional boundaries. Think pieces about power dynamics and workplace romance. They're calling me the ice queen who finally cracked, she said bitterly, suggesting that I'm having some kind of emotional breakdown, that you've manipulated me or I've lost perspective or both. I'm sorry, don't be. Sloane set down her phone. This isn't your fault, It's the cost of being a woman in tech who dared to have a personal life. If I were a male CEO dating my assistant, they'd write profiles calling it charming or humanizing. But because I'm a woman, it's a judgment failure. What did Quinn say? Cole asked, referring to Sloane's COO and closest friend. That I should prepare for this to get worse before it gets better. That Bradford Langley is using this as leverage to push for changes he's wanted for months. That my mother is actively lobbying other board members to force me to choose between you and my position. Can she do that? Force you to choose? Technically, no. But if she convinces enough board members that my judgment is compromised, they could call for a vote of no confidence. Remove me as CEO. Sloane's voice cracked slightly. 10 years of building this company, 10 years of sacrificing everything else in my life. And it could end because I fell in love with someone they don't consider appropriate. Cole reached for her hand. Then we fight harder. I'll document every achievement, every success, every way I'm contributing to Apex that has nothing to do with our relationship. We'll show them that this doesn't compromise your judgment. You're already doing that. Garrett told me about the Patterson account and the Meridian analysis you completed in half the time the senior team estimated. You're working yourself into the ground trying to prove you deserve to be here. Because I do deserve to be here. Not because of you, but because I'm good at what I do. I know that, Sloane said softly. I've always known that. I just wish everyone else could see it. They spent the evening together talking about strategy and contingency plans and how to handle the board meeting that Bradford Langley was pushing for. But underneath the practical discussion was fear. Fear that no matter how well they performed, no matter how properly they handled everything, Catherine Mercer's influence and Bradford's ambition and the weight of public perception might be too much to overcome. You could end this, Sloane said quietly as Cole was getting ready to leave. Tell people we've broken up. I'd transfer you to a different division. We'd stay apart long enough for the gossip to die down. And then later after the board is satisfied, we could... No, Cole interrupted. We're not doing that. We're not lying and we're not hiding. We go forward together or not at all, even if it costs me my company. Even then. Because you deserve to have both, Sloane was there. You deserve success and happiness. and I'm not going to be the reason you settle for only half a life. She kissed him then, desperate and clinging, and Cole wondered if she believed him or if she was already calculating the cost of choosing love over everything she'd built. Tuesday morning brought a development that shifted the entire dynamic. Jack Hartley called Cole at work, his voice tense. I need Catherine Mercer's address. What? Why? Because I'm going to go talk to her. Woman to woman isn't working clearly, so we're going to try man to parent. I raised you to be a good man. She raised Sloane to be a brilliant woman. Between us, we should be able to figure out that what's happening between you two isn't a crisis, it's just life. Dad, you don't have to. I know I don't have to, I want to. Because I'm not going to sit back and watch my son get attacked for being exactly the kind of man I taught him to be. Now give me that address. Cole texted him Catherine's address in Pacific Heights, an estate that took up half a block in one of the city's most expensive neighborhoods. Then he spent the rest of the afternoon trying to focus on work while imagining his father, who'd spent 4 decades in work boots and tool belts, knocking on the door of old San Francisco money. Jack Hartley drove his 20-year-old pickup truck through streets where every other vehicle was a Tesla or Mercedes. Found the address Cole had sent and parked on the street, not caring that his truck looked like a rust bucket next to the gleaming luxury cars. Walked up to a mansion that probably cost more than he'd earned in his entire 40-year career. A housekeeper answered the door, clearly uncertain how to handle this gray-haired man in worn jeans, who asked to speak with Mrs. Mercer. I don't have an appointment, Jack acknowledged, but I think she'll want to hear what I have to say. Tell her Jack Hartley is here. Cole's father. The housekeeper disappeared. 5 minutes later, Catherine Mercer herself appeared in the doorway. She was exactly what Jack had expected. Impeccably dressed, perfectly composed, radiating the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about money. Mr. Hartley, I didn't invite you. No, you didn't, but we need to talk about your daughter and my son. I have nothing to discuss with you. That's where you're wrong, Jack said calmly, because whether you like it or not, our kids are in love. And what you're doing right now, the board members you are calling, the articles you're leaking to the press, the false complaints your lawyers are filing, it's not protecting Sloane. It's hurting her. Catherine's expression flickered just for a second. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. May I come in, or are we going to have this conversation on your doorstep where your neighbors can hear? Catherine stepped aside, not graciously but pragmatically. Led Jack through a foyer that probably cost more to furnish than Jack's entire house, into a sitting room with furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. Say what you came to say, Catherine commanded, remaining standing. Jack took his time, settling into one of the expensive chairs, refusing to be intimidated by wealth. My wife died 23 years ago, cancer, left me alone with a 7-year-old son and not nearly enough money to give him everything I wanted to give him. You know what I did? I'm sure you're about to tell me. I taught him that value has nothing to do with how much money you make. That being a good man means showing up when things are hard, treating people with respect, and working for something bigger than yourself. Cole grew up in a rent-controlled apartment, wore secondhand clothes, learned to fix things because we couldn't afford to replace them. And you know what? He's a better man than most of the wealthy kids who had everything handed to them. How touching, Catherine said coldly. But my daughter, your daughter, built a billion-dollar company before she was 35. Jack interrupted. She's brilliant, driven, and successful beyond anything most people achieve in a lifetime. So tell me, Mrs. Mercer, is she proud of you? The question landed like a physical blow. Catherine's composure cracked just slightly. Excuse me, your daughter, when she thinks about you, does she feel pride, gratitude, love, or does she feel controlled, manipulated, and suffocated by expectations she can never meet? You don't get to come into my home, and I can see it in how you're acting. Jack continued relentlessly but not unkindly. The board members you're calling, the lawyers filing false reports, the articles questioning her judgment. You're not protecting her. You're trying to control her because you're terrified. Terrified of what? Of her being happy without your approval, of her choosing a life you didn't script for her, of her finding something real with someone who doesn't fit your vision of suitable. Catherine sat down abruptly, her armor showing cracks. You know nothing about my family, about what I've sacrificed for Sloane. Then tell me, Jack said gently. Because I'm listening. And Catherine, to her own surprise, did. Told him about her husband, about the infidelity and the lies, and the humiliation of discovering he'd been planning to leave her for months before his fatal car accident. Told him about paying off his debts, about using her family money to give Sloane opportunities, about the terror of watching her daughter potentially make the same mistakes. I don't want her to end up like me, Catherine said, and for the first time her voice shook. Successful but alone, powerful but powerless over her own happiness. I thought if I could guide her toward the right kind of man, someone from our world who understood our expectations, she could avoid my mistakes. But she's not you, Jack said quietly. And Cole is not your husband. He's a mechanic's son electrician. And yes, he is. He's also honest, hardworking, and completely devoted to your daughter. I've watched Cole fall in love with Sloane over 3 years, watched him manufacture emergencies to save her from dates she didn't want to be on, watched him protect her and support her and never ask for anything in return. You want to know if he's after her money? He turned down opportunities at companies that would pay him twice what Apex does because he wanted to work for her. You want to know if he's using her? He wrote a resignation letter and was planning to quit rather than put her in an uncomfortable position. Catherine was quiet processing this. Your daughter is not weak, Jack continued. She's not making a mistake. She's making a choice to build a life with someone who sees her as a human being rather than an acquisition or a status symbol. And you can either support that choice or you can keep fighting it. But I promise you, if you force her to choose between you and happiness, you'll lose. And you'll deserve to. How dare you, I dare, because I've already lost someone I loved. Jack's voice was rough with old grief. My wife died, and I never got to tell her half the things I should have said. I never got to fix the fights we had over stupid things that didn't matter. And I've spent 23 years knowing that time is precious and you don't waste it on pride or control or fear. You use it to love the people you have while you still can. Catherine's hands were shaking. She clasped them together, trying to regain composure. So here's what I'm asking, Jack said. Not as Cole's father, but as someone who understands loss. Stop fighting this. Stop calling board members and planting stories and creating crises. Give them a chance to prove that what they have is real and good. And if you can't do it for Sloane, do it, because someday you're going to look back on this moment and you'll regret every obstacle you put in the way of your daughter's happiness. And if they fail, if it doesn't work out, then they fail, Jack said simply. But they'll have failed trying to build something real rather than succeeding at something hollow. And Sloane will know you trusted her judgment, which is worth more than any arranged marriage to someone suitable. Catherine stood and walked to the window, looking out at her perfectly manicured garden. For a long time she said nothing. Then quietly, my husband told me I was too cold, that I cared more about appearances than connection. I thought he was being cruel. But maybe he was right. You have a chance to be different, Jack offered, to choose connection over control, to be the mother Sloane needs instead of the mother you think she should have. What if I don't know how? Then learn. Start by calling off whatever you're planning with the board. Start by trusting that you raised a smart, capable woman who can make her own decisions. Start by meeting my son and seeing for yourself what kind of man he is instead of judging him based on his bank account. Catherine turned to face him. You really believe they love each other? I know they do. I've seen it in my son, and I'm guessing if you look honestly, you've seen it in your daughter too. Something shifted in Catherine's expression. Not acceptance, not yet, but the beginning of doubt. What you're asking requires me to admit I've been wrong. It requires you to admit you're human, Jack corrected. To admit you've been operating from fear rather than wisdom. That's not weakness. That's courage. Catherine walked Jack to the door, her movements slower than when she'd answered it. At the threshold, she paused. Your son. He really wrote a resignation letter rather than put Sloane in an awkward position. He did. Probably still has it saved on his laptop. Cole would rather sacrifice his career than compromise her integrity. Catherine nodded slowly. Tell Cole that She stopped struggling with words that clearly didn't come easily. Tell him I'll consider what you've said. It was the closest thing to a concession Jack was likely to get, and he accepted it with grace. Thank you for listening, Mrs. Mercer. Catherine, she corrected quietly. If we're going to be connected through our children, you might as well call me Catherine. Jack drove home feeling like he'd fought a battle with words instead of tools, and he wasn't entirely sure who'd won. But he'd planted seeds, and sometimes that was enough. That evening, Cole got a call from Sloan. Her voice was shaking somewhere between laughter and tears. My mother just called me, for the first time since the article dropped. She didn't apologize, didn't say she was wrong, but she asked. She asked me to tell her about you, about us. Actually asked instead of dictating. Cole felt hope flicker in his chest. My dad went to see her today. I was terrified about what might happen. Whatever he said got through to her. I don't think she's completely on board yet, but she's not actively sabotaging us anymore. She called Bradford Langley and told him she wouldn't support a vote of no confidence. She withdrew the complaints her lawyers filed. The relief was dizzying. So we have a chance, Sloan confirmed. The board meeting is still happening next week. Bradford is still pushing his agenda. But without my mother's support, he doesn't have the votes to force me out. They talked for another hour, making plans and discussing strategy, and simply enjoying the feeling of not being under siege. When they finally hung up, Cole immediately called his father. Dad, whatever you said to Catherine Mercer, I just reminded her that love is rarer and more valuable than any amount of money or status, Jack said. And that sacrificing your daughter's happiness for the sake of appearances is a poor trade no matter how you calculate it. She listened. She's scared, son. Scared of losing Sloan, scared of being wrong, scared of a world she doesn't fully understand anymore. But underneath that fear, she loves her daughter. I could see it. And love, even when it's expressed badly, is still love. Cole felt his throat tighten. Thank you for fighting for us. That's what fathers do. Jack said simply, now go build something worth fighting for. The week leading up to the board meeting was tense but no longer desperate. Cole continued proving himself in strategic operations, completing a comprehensive analysis of a potential merger that Garrett said would save the company from a costly mistake. Sloan managed board politics and client relationships with her usual brilliance, showing no sign of the pressure she was under. And slowly the office gossip began to shift. Not everyone was convinced, but enough people had seen Cole's work, had heard Dutch's defense in the cafeteria, had noticed that Sloan seemed happier than she'd been in years, that the narrative started to change. By Friday evening, the night before the crucial board meeting, Cole met Sloan at his apartment. It was the first time she'd seen where he lived, a modest one-bedroom in the Sunset District with furniture from IKEA and walls that needed painting. She looked around with genuine curiosity, picking up books from his shelf, examining the photos of him and his father, taking in the details of his life outside work. This is you, she said finally. This is who you are when you're not performing for anyone. This is me, Cole confirmed. Not impressive by any metric that matters to Silicon Valley. Sloan turned to face him. It's perfect, because it's real. You're real, and I'm so tired of things that look beautiful but feel empty. They spent the evening going over strategy for the board meeting one more time. Then they stopped talking about business and just existed together, watching an old noir film that Sloan loved, eating takeout from the Thai place down the street, pretending for a few hours that they were just two people in love, instead of two people preparing for battle. Around midnight, as Sloan was getting ready to leave, she stopped at the door. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know something. These past 3 years, all those rescues, all those nights at Sal's, all those moments when you made me feel like I could be myself, those weren't leading up to this moment. They were the point. Even if tomorrow goes badly, even if we lose everything, I won't regret any of it. Cole kissed her slow and deep. Tomorrow won't go badly. We've done everything right. We've been transparent, ethical, professional. We've proven that our relationship doesn't compromise our judgment. And we're walking into that boardroom together, not as CEO and employee, but as partners. Partners, Sloan repeated, testing the word. I like that. So do I. After she left, Cole stood at his window looking out at the fog rolling in from the ocean. Tomorrow would determine whether they could have both love and career, whether the world was ready to accept that someone like him could be an equal partner to someone like Sloan. He thought about his father's words, about his mother's choice, about the value of building something real, even when it cost everything else. And he decided that regardless of what the board decided, he'd already won the only thing that mattered. He had Sloan's love. Everything else was just details. Saturday morning arrived with crystalline clarity, the kind of weather that made San Francisco feel like a postcard of itself. Cole woke at 5:30, too anxious to sleep, and went for a run along Ocean Beach. The Pacific stretched gray and vast to the horizon, waves breaking in steady rhythm, indifferent to human drama. He ran until his lungs burned and his mind cleared until the anxiety transmuted into something closer to readiness. By 7, he was showered and dressed in his best suit, the charcoal one he'd worn to that first interview 3 years ago. It still fit well, though now it carried different weight, not the desperate hope of someone trying to prove he belonged, but the quiet confidence of someone who knew his worth regardless of what happened in the next few hours. His phone showed a text from Sloan sent at 6:15. Couldn't sleep. Keep thinking about what we're walking into. He typed back, "We've done everything right. The rest is just theater." Her response came immediately. "Theater where my career might end." Cole called instead of texting. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight with controlled fear. "You built this company from nothing," he reminded her. "You survived 10 years of people telling you that you were too young, too female, too ambitious. You've weathered hostile board members and market crashes and competitors trying to destroy you. Bradford Langley and whatever he's planned for today is just one more challenge. And you've already beaten worse. What if it's not enough? Then we start over. Build something new." But Sloan, listen to me. You're going to walk into that boardroom and remind everyone exactly why you're the CEO. Not because of your relationship with me, but because you're brilliant and strategic and you've delivered results for a decade. Whatever Bradford throws at you, you've already survived harder things. He heard her breathing steady, the panic ebbing into determination. "You're right. I know you're right. I just needed to hear someone else say it. That's what partners do." "Partners," she repeated, and Cole could hear the smile in her voice. "Okay, I'll see you at the office." And Cole, "Thank you for being exactly who you are." The board meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock. Cole arrived at Apex at 8:30, early enough to feel the building's weekend emptiness, the way silence amplified every footstep. He took the elevator to the executive floor where the boardroom occupied the entire south corner with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. Garrett Sullivan was already there reviewing documents on his tablet. The CFO looked up when Cole entered, his expression unreadable. "You ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be." "Bradford's been making calls all week," Garrett said quietly. "He thinks he has the votes to force Sloan into an impossible choice, end the relationship or face a vote of no confidence. He's positioning himself as the voice of responsible governance, the board member willing to make hard decisions for the company's good. Does he have the votes? He thinks he does." Bradford, Robert Chen, and Vivian Cross were firmly in his camp as of yesterday. "That's 3 out of 8. He needs 5 to force action." Garrett paused. But something changed last night. Catherine Mercer called Bradford and told him she wouldn't support any motion against Sloan. That leaves him needing 2 more votes from the remaining board members, and most of them are waiting to see how the meeting goes before committing. So it's not decided yet. Nothing's decided until the vote happens. Garrett met Cole's eyes. "But I'll tell you this, Bradford's planning to come at you hard. He's going to question your qualifications, your motivations, your entire professional history. He'll try to make you look like an opportunist who seduced his way into a promotion." "Let him try," Cole said evenly. "I have 3 years of documented performance. Every achievement is measurable and verifiable. He can question my motives all he wants, but he can't argue with results." Other board members began arriving. Thomas Bradford, first looking smug and confident in a way that made Cole's hands want to form fists. Then Sarah Mitchell, one of the founding board members who'd been with Apex since the early days. Then the others filling the room with expensive suits and careful neutrality. Sloan arrived exactly at 9, wearing navy blue and an expression of absolute control. She took her seat at the head of the table without acknowledging Cole beyond a brief professional nod. The 30-day discretion period had technically ended 2 days ago, but they'd agreed to maintain professional distance during the meeting itself. No hand-holding, no supportive glances, nothing Bradford could use as evidence of inappropriate workplace conduct. Maggie Reed from HR sat in the corner with her laptop there to document the proceedings and ensure proper protocols were followed. She gave Cole a small, encouraging nod. Thomas Bradford called the meeting to order with the kind of authority that suggested he'd been imagining this moment for months. "Let's address the matter we're all here to discuss. the CEO's relationship with a former subordinate and the concerns it raises about judgment and corporate governance. Sloane's voice cut through like a blade made of ice. I'd prefer to frame it differently, Bradford. We're here to discuss whether Apex Technologies has policies in place to properly manage workplace relationships and whether those policies have been followed in this instance. The answer to both questions is yes. The policies exist because of concerns about power dynamics and potential favoritism, Bradford countered. The very fact that we're having this meeting suggests those concerns are valid, or it suggests that some board members are more interested in control than in actual company performance, Sloan replied. Apex's revenue is up 18% quarter over quarter. Employee retention is at a 5-year high. Our client satisfaction scores are the best in the industry. I'm happy to discuss my romantic relationship, but let's not pretend this meeting is really about protecting the company. It's about protecting egos. Bradford's jaw tightened. Personal attacks won't change the fundamental issue. It's not a personal attack to point out that this board has never questioned a male CEO's judgment over his personal life. Sloan leaned forward slightly. But the moment a female CEO has a relationship you don't approve of, suddenly it's a crisis requiring emergency intervention. So let's be honest about what we're really discussing here. The room went silent for a beat. Then Sarah Mitchell spoke up, her voice measured. I think we can all agree that workplace relationships require careful management regardless of gender. The question isn't whether Sloan has the right to a personal life. It's whether the relationship with Cole Hartley was handled appropriately under company policy. It was Maggie Reed interjected from her corner. I've completed a thorough investigation. Every aspect of their relationship, disclosure, and management has followed proper protocols. Mr. Hartley transferred to a different department with a different supervisor. Ms. Mercer has recused herself from all decisions regarding his compensation and advancement. There's no evidence of favoritism or inappropriate conduct. Bradford pulled out a folder. And yet I have anonymous complaints, which your office traced to an IP address associated with Catherine Mercer's attorneys. Maggie interrupted calmly. Complaints that were filed after the relationship was disclosed and which security footage directly contradicts. Those complaints appear to be manufactured rather than legitimate. Bradford's composure slipped fractionally. Regardless of their origin, the complaints represent concerns that employees may have. Employees who've never come forward with actual names or specific incidents, Garrett added. I've asked around. The rank and file aren't upset about this. Most of them think Sloan and Cole are good together. The only people who seem bothered are in this room. Because we have a responsibility to maintain standards, Bradford insisted, to ensure that personal relationships don't compromise professional judgment. And I have serious concerns about whether Mr. Hartley's rapid advancement was based entirely on merit. Cole spoke for the first time, his voice steady despite his racing pulse. I'm happy to walk through my performance record in detail if that would help address your concerns. Bradford turned his attention to Cole fully, now his expression suggesting he'd been waiting for this opportunity. Mr. Hartley, you were hired as an executive assistant 3 years ago. No MBA, no experience at a major technology company. Yet within months you were receiving raises and expanded responsibilities. Then conveniently you start a relationship with the CEO, and suddenly you're promoted to strategic operations. You don't see how that raises questions. I see how it might raise questions for people who don't look at the actual data, Cole replied. Every raise I received was tied to specific achievements. I saved the company money by fixing equipment that would have required expensive service contracts. I identified inefficiencies in scheduling and communication that improved executive productivity. My performance reviews are documented and available for examination. And your recent promotion was initiated by Garrett Sullivan based on departmental needs and my qualifications, not by Sloan. Cole pulled out his own folder, the one he'd been preparing for weeks. Since transferring to strategic operations 4 weeks ago, I've completed 3 major projects. The Patterson account, a $15 million contract that was about to walk. I salvaged it and expanded it to $22 million. The Meridian acquisition analysis, an $80 million deal that I identified 3 critical legal issues with issues that would have cost the company approximately $20 million in year 2 losses. And the employee retention proposal that projects a 5% reduction in turnover through cost-neutral initiatives. Those projects were team efforts, Bradford objected. No, Garrett corrected. Those projects were Cole's work. I assigned them specifically to test whether he could deliver at this level. He exceeded expectations on all three. The Meridian analysis alone would justify his position. He found problems our senior legal team missed, which proves he's capable, Bradford acknowledged. It doesn't address whether the relationship influenced his placement in a position to demonstrate that capability. Before anyone could respond, the conference room door opened. Catherine Mercer walked in uninvited and unexpected. She wore cream and carried herself with the kind of authority that came from decades of moving through rooms where her presence mattered. Sloane's eyes widened fractionally. "Mother, you're not a board member, I'm a 15% shareholder," Catherine interrupted smoothly, "which gives me the right to attend board meetings if I choose to exercise it. And today I choose to exercise it." Bradford looked confused but pleased. "Mrs. Mercer, welcome. I believe we're aligned on concerns about you believe incorrectly." Catherine cut him off. She moved to the front of the room, commanding attention without asking for it. "I'm here to address this board's apparent confusion about what actually threatens this company." Bradford recovered quickly. "We're trying to protect Apex from the appearance of impropriety. You're trying to use my daughter's personal life as leverage for your own agenda," Catherine said bluntly, "and I won't allow it." The room went completely silent. Cole felt his heart hammering, unsure where this was going. "I came to this meeting planning to support Mr. Langley's concerns," Catherine continued. "I've spent the past month trying to end my daughter's relationship with Cole Hartley through every means at my disposal, board, pressure, media leaks, anonymous complaints, that I now understand were a mistake." Sloane's face had gone carefully blank, but Cole could see the tension in her shoulders. "I did those things because I was terrified." Catherine's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. "Terrified that Sloane would make the same mistakes I made, that she'd choose the wrong person and end up hurt or diminished or destroyed by love gone wrong. I thought if I could control her choices, I could protect her from my pain." Catherine turned to look directly at Sloane. But someone reminded me recently that fear is a poor foundation for decision-making, that my daughter is not me, and that trying to force her to live according to my trauma isn't protection, it's control." "Who reminded you of that?" Sarah Mitchell asked quietly. "Jack Hartley," Catherine said. "Cole's father, a man who spent 40 years as an electrician and who showed me more wisdom in one conversation than I've found in decades of country club luncheons and society benefits." She addressed the board again. "Here's what I learned from Jack Hartley. That value isn't measured in stock portfolios or social connections. That integrity matters more than pedigree, and that my daughter, who built a billion-dollar company before she was 35, is perfectly capable of making her own decisions about who she loves." Bradford tried to interject, but Catherine held up a hand. "You want to question Cole Hartley's qualifications? Let me tell you what I discovered when I actually investigated rather than assumed. This young man wrote a resignation letter rather than put Sloane in an uncomfortable position. He's worked himself to exhaustion, proving his worth independent of their relationship. He's been attacked in the press, gossiped about by colleagues, and threatened by me personally, and through all of it, he's maintained his integrity and his commitment to my daughter." Catherine's voice softened slightly. "My husband left me, not because I lacked money or status or beauty, but because I was cold. Because I valued appearances over connection. Because I built a perfect life that felt empty. I spent 20 years being exactly what society expected, and it brought me nothing but loneliness." She looked at Sloane again, and Cole saw tears threatening in both women's eyes. "I don't want that for you. I don't want you to wake up at 60 and realize you sacrificed happiness for the approval of people who don't actually care about your well-being. So if this board tries to force you to choose between Cole and your career, they'll have to go through me first. And I promise you I am far more dangerous as an ally to my daughter than I ever was as an obstacle." Bradford had gone red in the face. "Mrs. Mercer, this is highly irregular. What's irregular is a board member using a CEO's personal life as ammunition for a power play," Catherine snapped. "Everyone in this room knows you've wanted Sloane's position for years, Bradford. You've questioned her decisions, undermined her authority, and now you're pretending that this relationship is about corporate governance when it's really about your ego." She sat down in an empty chair, uninvited but unchallenged. I'm withdrawing my opposition to the relationship. I'm also informing this board that any attempt to force Sloan to choose between her personal life and her professional role will result in me selling my 15% stake to whichever competitor offers the best price. And I assure you, I've already received very interesting offers from companies that would love to poach Apex's technology and talent. The threat landed like a bomb. 15% sold to a competitor could trigger all kinds of corporate chaos. Knowledge transfer key employee departures, strategic advantages handed to rivals. It was mutually assured destruction, and Catherine was willing to pull the trigger. Thomas Bradford, the founding board member, who'd been silent until now, finally spoke. I've heard enough. Bradford, you've made your concerns clear, but I'm not seeing evidence of actual harm to the company. Sloan's performance as CEO has been exemplary. Cole's work in strategic operations has exceeded expectations. Their relationship appears to be managed appropriately. So unless you have something beyond speculation and anonymous complaints, I suggest we move on. Bradford tried one more time. The optics alone, the optics of forcing out our most successful CEO over a relationship that doesn't actually affect her performance, would be catastrophic. Sarah Mitchell interrupted. We'd face lawsuits, media scrutiny, and talent flight. I've been with this company since the beginning, and I'm not going to watch it implode because some board members can't separate their personal feelings from business judgment. Garrett spoke up. I'd like to add something. I've worked with Cole for the past month. I've seen his work ethic, his strategic thinking, his ability to deliver results under pressure. Everything he's accomplished has been earned. And frankly, if we force him out because of who he's dating, we'll lose someone who's already proven to be an asset to this company. Cole sat quietly through the defense, letting others speak for him. But when there was a pause, he stood. May I address the board directly? Thomas nodded. Please. Cole took a breath, gathering words he'd been preparing for days. I understand the concerns about power dynamics and favoritism. Those are legitimate issues that any responsible company should take seriously. But here's what I want to make clear. I didn't pursue a relationship with Sloan because I saw an opportunity for advancement. I fell in love with her because over 3 years of working together, I came to know her as someone brilliant, driven, and fundamentally good. Someone who cares deeply about this company and everyone in it. Someone who deserves to be loved for who she is, not what she can provide. He looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes. My father taught me that a man's value isn't determined by his credentials or his bank account. It's determined by his contributions, by what he builds, by whether he shows up when things are difficult. I've shown up for Apex every day for 3 years. I've solved problems, delivered results, and never asked for special treatment. The only thing I'm asking for now is the same thing any employee deserves: to be judged on my work, not on assumptions about my character. Cole placed his folder on the table. Everything I've achieved is documented in here. Every project, every success metric, every way I've contributed to Apex's growth. You can examine it all. And if you still believe I'm unqualified or that I'm using Sloan for personal gain, then vote accordingly. But vote based on facts, not fear. He sat down, pulse racing but voice steady. Sloan was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Pride maybe, or gratitude, or love barely contained beneath professional composure. Thomas Bradford cleared his throat. I move that we vote. The question before us is whether to support the continued employment of both Sloan Mercer as CEO and Cole Hartley in his current role, with the understanding that their relationship has been properly disclosed and managed according to company policy. Bradford objected immediately. That's not the motion I wanted. It's the motion we're voting on, Thomas said firmly. All in favor of supporting both individuals in their current roles, raise your hand. Cole watched the hands go up. Thomas first, then Sarah, then Garrett, by virtue of his proxy vote. That was 3. They needed 5 for a clear majority. Vivian Cross, who'd been silent throughout, raised her hand. 4. Then Robert Chen, who'd been expected to side with the Bradford, surprised everyone by raising his hand as well. I don't love the situation, he said, but I love the company more than I love my discomfort. Enforcing changes based on personal relationships sets a precedent I'm not willing to establish. 5. The remaining 2 board members, Marcus Webb and Jennifer Okafor, raised their hands almost simultaneously. 7 out of 8. Motion passes, Thomas said. Sloan remains CEO. Cole remains in strategic operations. The relationship is acknowledged as properly managed under company policy. Bradford, you are outvoted. I suggest you accept it with grace. Bradford stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You're all making a mistake. This company will regret this decision, or will regret wasting time on this meeting when we could have been focused on actual business, Sarah said mildly. Your concern is noted, Bradford. Now please sit down or leave. Bradford left, slamming the door behind him with enough force that the windows rattled. In the silence that followed, Sloan spoke carefully. Thank you all for your trust. I promise I'll continue to earn it. Thomas smiled slightly. You've been earning it for 10 years. I see no reason that will change now. Meeting adjourned. The board members filed out, some offering congratulations, others maintaining professional neutrality. Catherine approached Sloan hesitant in a way Cole had never seen her. May I speak with you? Catherine's voice was quieter than it had been during her testimony. Privately, Sloan nodded, still processing everything that had just happened. They moved to a corner of the room while the last board members departed. Cole started to give them space, but Catherine stopped him. No, stay. This involves you as well. She turned to Sloan, and Cole could see her armor cracking, revealing vulnerability beneath. I owe you an apology. For the past month, for the past 10 years, for every time I tried to control your life instead of trusting your judgment. I was so afraid of you being hurt that I became the person hurting you. And I'm sorry. Sloane's professional mask finally broke. Tears spilled over, and she made no attempt to hide them. Do you mean it? Or is this just another strategy? I mean it. Catherine reached out tentatively, and when Sloan didn't pull away, she took her daughter's hands. Jack Hartley asked me if you were proud of me. And I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd done something that deserved your pride. I've been so focused on what I thought you should be that I never celebrated who you are. Mom Sloan's voice cracked. I just wanted you to see me. Not the CEO you helped create, not the daughter who checks boxes on your social list, but me, the person who still misses Dad, who gets scared sometimes, who wants to be successful and happy, not just one or the other. I see you, Catherine said, crying now too. And I'm so sorry it took me this long. I'm sorry I needed a stranger to show me what I should have seen myself, that you're extraordinary exactly as you are. They hugged, tentative at first, then tighter, years of distance collapsing into connection. Cole felt his own throat tighten watching them. When they finally pulled apart, Catherine turned to him. Cole, I owe you an apology as well. I judged you based on prejudice and fear rather than character. I tried to bribe you, threaten you, and destroy your reputation. You would have every right to despise me. I don't despise you. You were protecting your daughter the only way you knew how. That's generous, considering I was doing it very badly. Catherine straightened her shoulders, some of her normal composure returning. Jack invited me to dinner. Your father suggested we should, what did he call it, get to know each other properly since we're connected through our children. I'd like to accept that invitation. If you and Sloan are willing, we're willing, Sloan said, looking at Cole for confirmation. We are, Cole agreed. Though fair warning, Dad's cooking is about substance over style. Don't expect anything fancy. Catherine smiled slightly. I think I've had enough fancy to last a lifetime. Substance sounds perfect. The months that followed felt like learning to breathe after years of holding your breath. The tech press moved on to other scandals. Bradford Langley quietly left the board in February, taking a position at a competitor where he could be the loudest voice in smaller rooms. The office gossip faded as people saw that Cole and Sloan's relationship didn't change how either of them worked. If anything, they were both more focused and effective. Cole thrived in strategic operations, taking on increasingly complex projects. By March, Garrett was including him in senior leadership meetings. By April, he'd been promoted to Director of Strategic Initiatives with a salary that made him laugh the first time he saw it. Not because it was more than he deserved, but because he'd spent so long believing his worth was measured by his father's tax bracket rather than his own capabilities. Sloan and Catherine built a new relationship slowly through Sunday brunches and honest conversations. They'd never be the picture-perfect mother-daughter pair that Catherine had once envisioned, but they found something better, genuine connection, built on accepting each other as they were, rather than demanding they be something else. And Jack Hartley became an unexpected fixture in Catherine Mercer's life. They met for coffee every Tuesday, two people from completely different worlds who discovered they spoke the same language when it came to loving their children and regretting past mistakes. Catherine started donating to the union that Jack had belonged to for 40 years. Jack started showing up at society benefits when Catherine needed someone who'd tell her the truth instead of what she wanted to hear. By June, 6 months after that rainy night outside Harbor Restaurant, Cole and Sloan had settled into rhythms that felt like permanence. They alternated between her penthouse and his apartment, though Cole was gradually moving his things to Pacific Heights because Sloan's space had better views and his lease was ending anyway. They went to Sal's Diner every Sunday night, sitting in their usual booth while Dolores served terrible coffee and called them honey. They worked hard and fought occasionally and learned each other's patterns the way people do when they're building a life together. On a Friday evening in late June, Apex held its quarterly all-hands meeting. Sloan stood at the front of the assembled company, 500 employees who'd grown the company from startup to industry leader and presented results that exceeded every projection. Revenue up 34% year over year. The Meridian acquisition completed successfully, generating the exact returns Cole's analysis had predicted. Employee retention at the highest levels in company history. 3 new Fortune 500 clients signed. Every metric trending positive. But beyond the numbers, Sloan talked about culture. About building a company where people could bring their whole selves to work, where professional excellence didn't require personal sacrifice, where the policies existed to support people, not control them. And I want to acknowledge someone specifically, she said, finding Cole in the crowd. Cole Hartley joined Strategic Operations 6 months ago. In that time, he's delivered results that have saved this company from costly mistakes and opened doors to new opportunities. More than that, he's demonstrated what it means to earn your place through merit and dedication. I'm grateful to have him on the team. The applause was genuine, loud enough that Cole felt embarrassed and proud in equal measure. Sarah from finance caught his eye and gave him a thumbs up. Garrett nodded approvingly. Even employees who'd been skeptical 6 months ago seemed to have come around. After the meeting, Cole found Sloan in her office. She was standing by the windows looking out at the city they'd fought so hard to stay in together. That was quite an endorsement, he said. She turned smiling. You've earned it. The board just approved your promotion to Vice President of Strategic Development. Garrett recommended it. I recused myself from the vote. They approved it unanimously. VP Cole felt the weight of the title, the responsibility it carried. That's a significant step. You've taken significant steps to get here. Sloan moved closer. 6 months ago, people questioned whether you deserved to be at Apex at all. Today, you're one of the youngest VPs in company history, and you did it through work that speaks for itself. We did it, Cole corrected. Together. Sloan kissed him soft and sweet, then pulled back with a mischievous expression. VP Hartley. It has a nice ring to it, though I can think of a different title that might suit you even better. What title you'll find out. Tonight, Sal's Diner, 7 o'clock. Don't be late. Sal's Diner looked exactly the same as it had for the past 3 years. The same cracked vinyl booths, the same fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly jaundiced, the same smell of coffee that had been sitting too long on the burner. Dolores greeted them with her usual efficiency, already knowing what they'd order before they sat down. Cole and Sloan slid into their booth, the one by the window, where they'd shared hundreds of conversations, where Sloan had first asked him to tell her something true, where they'd built a friendship that had slowly transformed into love. I've been thinking, Sloan began, cradling her coffee cup between both hands. About the first time we came here. Do you remember after I rescued you from the lawyer who talked about his car for 20 minutes? You looked so nervous, like you'd crossed some invisible line by suggesting we get food together. I had crossed a line, Cole said. I just didn't realize how many more lines we'd crossed before we got here. Sloan smiled. Here meaning Sal's Diner. Here meaning us. Together. Public. No more hiding or pretending or manufacturing fake emergencies. I miss the emergencies sometimes, Sloan admitted. Not the stress, but the excuse to see you outside of work. The secret of it. We don't need excuses anymore. No, Sloan set down her coffee and reached into her purse, pulling out a small box, which is why I wanted to do this properly. She opened the box to reveal a ring, simple, elegant, masculine. The kind of ring that suggested permanence without ostentation. Cole's breath caught. Sloan, I know this isn't traditional. Usually the man proposes to the woman. But we've never been traditional, have we? Sloan's hands were shaking slightly. 3 years ago, you fixed my espresso machine, and I hired you thinking you'd be a competent assistant. I had no idea you'd become the person I couldn't imagine living without." Her voice steadied as she continued. "You taught me that success means nothing if there's no one to share it with. That being vulnerable isn't weakness. That love is worth fighting for even when the fight costs everything else. You showed up for me when I didn't even know I needed saving, and you've been showing up every day since." Sloan looked directly into his eyes. "So I'm asking you, Cole Hartley, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me that's messy and complicated and real? Will you be my partner, not just in title, but in every sense of the word?" Cole couldn't speak for a moment, emotion closing his throat. Then he laughed, reaching into his own pocket. "You're going to think I'm copying you." He pulled out his own small box, opened it to reveal a ring that complemented hers, simple, elegant, feminine. Sloane's eyes widened. "I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks," Cole admitted, "waiting for the right moment. I was going to propose tonight. Had this whole speech planned about how you're the most extraordinary person I've ever met, how loving you has made me braver than I knew I could be, how I want to spend the rest of my life being the person you come home to." They both started laughing, the absurdity and perfection of the moment overwhelming. "So is that a yes?" Sloan asked. "That's absolutely a yes, on one condition, which is you let me propose properly too, because I really did prepare a speech and I'm not wasting it." Cole stood, moved to her side of the booth, and knelt beside the table. Dolores, passing by with a coffee pot, stopped and smiled. Sloan Mercer. Cole began, aware that half the diner was now watching but not caring. "I fell in love with you 3 years ago when you smiled at me over a cup of espresso, and I saw the real you beneath the Ice Queen armor. I fell deeper in love during every late-night conversation in this booth, when you trusted me with your fears and dreams and the parts of yourself you hide from the world." He took her hand. "I love you not because you're a brilliant CEO or because you're successful or powerful. I love you because at 3 in the morning, when you think no one's watching you, let your guard down, and you're just Sloan, the woman who cries during sentimental commercials and laughs at terrible jokes and deserves to be loved exactly as she is." Cole slipped the ring onto her finger. "You asked me to be your partner. I'm asking you to be my wife, to build a life where we choose each other every single day, to prove that two people from completely different worlds can create something extraordinary together. Will you marry me?" Sloan was crying openly now, not caring about the mascara or the other diners or maintaining any semblance of composure. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes. 1,000 times yes." Cole stood and pulls her into his arms, kissing her, while Dolores and the handful of other diner patrons applauded. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, Sloan held up her hand to examine her ring. "I can't believe we both planned to propose tonight. Great minds think alike." "Or hearts," Sloan corrected. "Great hearts think alike." They sat together same side of the booth now, and Dolores brought them pancakes they hadn't ordered on the house, she said, because she'd been watching them dance around each other for 3 years, and it was about damn time they made it official. Cole's phone buzzed with a text from his father. "Catherine just called me, said you proposed," or "Sloan proposed," or both. "Either way, congratulations, son. Your mother would have loved her." He showed the text to Sloan, who smiled through fresh tears. "Tell him thank you for everything, for raising you right, for talking to my mother, for showing both of us what real character looks like." Cole typed back a response, then put his phone away. This moment deserved full attention, undivided and complete. They stayed at Sal's until Dolores started giving them pointed looks about the late hour. Walked to Cole's truck. He'd finally bought something newer, though still practical, and drove through San Francisco with the windows down, letting summer air wash over them. At a stoplight near Union Square, Sloan turned to him. "I keep thinking about what you said in the board meeting, about your value being determined by your contributions rather than your credentials. That stayed with me." "Because it's true," Cole said. "My father worked 40 years as an electrician. Never made a lot of money, never had status or prestige. But he contributed something real every day, fixing problems, helping people, teaching his son what it means to show up with integrity. That's worth more than any MBA. Your father is one of the wisest people I've ever met." Sloan laced her fingers through his. "And you're just like him, not in what you do, but in who you are." The light changed. Cole drove. "When we have kids," Sloan said quietly, testing the words, I want them to know both grandfathers, the electrician and the one who died too soon. I want them to understand that success comes in different forms and they all matter. When we have kids, Cole repeated warmth spreading through his chest. I like how that sounds. They ended up at Sloane's penthouse standing on the balcony overlooking the bay. Lights from the city reflected off the water, creating patterns that shifted with each wave. Behind them, through the glass doors, the apartment waited space they'd fill, together life. They'd build together, future they'd create together. People told me I couldn't have both, Sloane said. Career and love. Success and happiness. They said powerful women have to choose. They were wrong, she agreed. Because I have you and I have Apex, and I have a life that finally feels whole instead of fragmented. Cole pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. I used to think my worth was tied to what I could prove, that I needed to justify my existence through achievements and credentials and meeting other people's standards. But you taught me something better. What's that? That the most valuable thing I can do is show up as myself, fully honestly, without apology. That love isn't about being perfect, it's about being real. And that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose happiness even when the world tells you it's not practical or appropriate or smart. They stood in silence, breathing together and hearts beating in rhythm. Cole thought about the journey that had brought them here. 3 years of hidden love and manufactured emergencies. The terror of that first confession in the rain. The battles with Catherine and Bradford and their own fears. The slow, hard work of proving that what they had was worth fighting for. And he realized that every difficult moment had been necessary. Every obstacle had taught them something. Every person who doubted them had forced them to be certain of what they wanted. The path hadn't been easy, but it had been right. Looking back now, standing on this balcony with Sloane wearing his ring and him wearing hers, Cole understood what his father had been trying to teach him all along. Value isn't something other people assign to you. It's something you create through your choices, your actions, your willingness to stand for what matters even when it costs you. A man's worth isn't measured by where he started or what he accumulated. It's measured by who he became through the process of living honestly, loving fully, and refusing to accept a life that felt smaller than his capacity for joy. Cole had started as the son of an electrician, someone society might have overlooked or underestimated. But he'd become something more important than any title or salary could capture: a man who knew his worth, who'd fought for love without losing his integrity, who'd proven that being real mattered more than being impressive. And Sloane the Ice Queen, who'd built walls to survive in a world that punished women for being powerful, had become someone who could be strong and vulnerable simultaneously. Someone who'd learned that success without connection was just an impressive prison, and that true power came from allowing yourself to be fully known. Together, they'd created something neither could have built alone: a partnership built on equality and respect, a love that enhanced rather than diminished, a life that refused to accept false choices between career and happiness. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain in its details, but certain in its foundation. There would be challenges merging their lives completely. Planning a wedding and navigating the complexities of being both partners in love and colleagues in business. But they'd face those challenges the way they'd faced everything else together, honestly, with the courage to keep choosing each other even when it was hard. Sloane turned in his arms to face him. Tell me something true. It was the question she'd first asked 3 years ago in Sal's diner, the question that had become their private ritual. Cole smiled. I used to think the rescues were about saving you from bad dates, but really they were about saving us both, you from a life of performing, me from a life of settling. We rescued each other, and we're going to keep rescuing each other for the rest of our lives, not from emergencies, but from the fear of being less than we can be. Sloane kissed him slow and deep, tasting like coffee and promise. One more thing, Cole added when they pulled apart. The most important thing. What's that? I'm done measuring my life by other people's standards. Done apologizing for who I am or where I came from. Done pretending that love is weakness or that happiness requires permission. From now on, I'm living by one simple truth: a man's value isn't defined by credentials or pedigree or how much money he makes. It's defined by his willingness to show up for himself, for the people he loves, for the life he wants to build. And every single day for the rest of my life, I'm going to show up for you. The city lights glittered below them. The bay stretched dark and vast to the horizon. And two people who'd traveled very different paths to reach this moment stood together, finally free to be exactly who they were. In the end, that was the victory, not the board vote or the career success or the public acceptance. The victory was permission to be real, to love without hiding, to build a life that prioritized connection over convention, to prove that sometimes the bravest, most valuable thing you can do is choose happiness, even when the world insists you can't afford it. Cole Hartley had saved his CEO from countless terrible dates, never knowing she'd been in love with him all along. But the real story was simpler and more profound. Two people had saved each other from half-lived lives and learned that worth isn't something you prove. It's something you claim by living fully loving, bravely, and refusing to settle for anything less than the extraordinary.